Thank you. Good morning, Cayman. Good morning, media houses. I'm sure it'll be no surprise to you that I'm going to commence this morning press briefing with a brief statement on the nation building grants. There have been several grants to a variety of churches across the Cayman Islands since the establishment of the transfer payment vote, described in our budget as promotion of nation building. Many grants have also been made on this vote since its inception to support a wide variety of cultural, social, sports, community events. Additionally, many scholarships have been funded. Government remains content that the funds spent from this vote have benefited our community, as was expected, and there will be much good still to come from these investments in our social infrastructure. Details of these expenses up to the end of the budget year 2011-2012 have already been released in earlier statements and via responses to FOI inquiries. Staff are currently preparing a further statement on these expenses for the current year, and there are, I believe, at least 2 FOIs in on the same matter as we speak. There is nothing secret about this, nor there should be. I will end the brief statement at that, and I will say that I am making myself available to answer any questions from the press here this morning on that topic when we move into Q&A later in the press briefing. It's my pleasure, as usual, to turn it over to my deputy, the Minister responsible for education, for him to bring his weekly report.
Thank you. As everyone will know, this evening is going to be a great celebration up at Frank Sound. I am hoping that as many persons in the public, and obviously we're going to be having the press there as well, will be on hand for the official opening of the Clifton Hunter High School. Also just want to invite all persons, in particular small business owners, to go up to the Family Life Center. The Department of Commerce and Investment are hosting the very first Small Business Expo in Cayman. There are many booths up there, some very good products I've just gotten from there, and I believe it's well worthwhile the general public going up, but also those who are interested in opening small businesses. Throughout the day, there are many topics being covered, and they have guest speakers. So if you're a small business owner and you have a particular area that you might want to have access to a free lecture on, I would strongly encourage that you go up to the Family Life Center.
And I'll call on Honorable Glidden to bring his report.
Thank you, Honorable Premier. Just want to also express my thanks to the press. We've given a pretty detailed and comprehensive report of the ongoing of the ministry last week. We've been able to move forward with some of those initiatives. I look forward to, I understand there's some questions in regards to a few of those, and I look forward to being able to answer those questions specifically, but I really have nothing new specifically to report this week.
Thank you, Minister Seymour.
Thank you, Madam Premier. I'd just like to report briefly this morning, and very good morning to all this morning. Thank you all for coming. They've just had the appointment of a new chairman at the National Housing Board, Mr. Alan Bush. This was due to the resignation of one of the former chair, who is now running in the general elections. And I'd like to thank Mr. Bush, not only for taking on this new task as chairman, but for his contribution over the years as the deputy chair of the same board. The members are very supportive of Mr. Bush and are enthused about moving forward under Mr. Bush leadership. The pressing projects for this board to deal with at this time mainly is the Bodden Town Housing Project, of which 20 homes are being completed, and we hope to have purchases done within the next few weeks. And the board has agreed that moving forward, after meeting with the board just over a week ago, moving forward with the lease purchase agreement that was most preferred. And I'm very encouraged by the sentiments and the support from the board to move forward in this direction of lease to own, as most Bordentowners or Caymanians I spoke to didn't like the idea of just leasing or renting these homes. They wanted an opportunity to own homes, and we are making that become a reality and listening to the people of this country. And I thank the ministers and the cabinet for their support and trying to help us bring this historic project to Bordentown, where homes have never been built before. And I thank my colleague, Minister Scotland, for his tireless support. Thank you.
Minister Scotland.
Like Mr. Didden, I have no significant updates to bring this week, but I expect if there's any questions on any topics under my responsibility or otherwise, we'll be able to entertain them when we get to the question and answer segment.
Thank you. I guess with that is all open for questions, and I'm sure there'll be lots of them this morning.
Sure. Ms. Madam Premier, if we could just start with you on the Nation Building Fund, if we could just be a little bit more specific. The recent press reports seem to circulate around one or possibly two expenditures from the Nation Building Fund, one that was given to a church, I think in Red Bay, that you apparently spoke about on Sunday, and the other one was a $40,000 expenditure to a church in Cayman Brack. Can you just speak a little bit more about what those specific expenditures were for?
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. Since the 2012-13 budget, the former Premier, of which we all, including the 5 ministers here, formed an integral part of that and agreed. There were, based on the files that have been supplied by my technical staff, a total of 10 churches that have been granted. They were granted and approved by the former Premier, which was in his discretion. It was a vote that we all know that was his brainchild. The two in question, one was the Red Bay Church of God, and I'm calling that, you can do an FOI to get the names of the other ones. I'm not going to call their names out publicly. I specifically call that, and I'll say the Cayman Brack Church, because I don't believe that this is the forum for me to call their individual names. But let me just deal with the Red Bay Church. Quite happy to do so. On the 5th of May last year, and the date is important, seeing that I became Premier the last week in December, the church wrote to the former Premier, Mr. Bush, just give me 1 second, making the request. It was on the 5th of May 2012. Honorable Premier Bush, OB, etc., etc. Dear Mr. Bush, and please, I beg your indulgence to read the letter that was written so you can put it in perspective. Church of God Holiness requests for financial assistance for church property improvements. And this is one of many churches, but we know why this church is picked out, and I have an obligation to respond. Although my church is Church of God Holiness, we're affiliated. I go to Church of God Holiness Watching Place in Spot Bay. When I'm on Grand Cayman, I attend a number of churches, Red Bay being one of them. Greetings in the wonderful name of our Lord Jesus Christ. As senior pastor of the church, I write on behalf of the board and the church in general to seek your kind consideration for a grant from the Nation Building Fund in order to do the work of the following dire needs of the church. The roof of the church has been in a state of disrepair for some time now, and to date it has not yet been repaired. As a result, there are several rotted areas, and the ceiling is being damaged by leaks to the point of us having to utilize containers to catch the water when it rains. The parking lot around the church totally floods when it rains, and it is practically impossible for members and visitors alike to park there as water covers the parking area. Not only does this result in the parking lot being unsafe and unsightly during these specific times of inclement weather, but it also severely limits the available number of parking spaces. Furthermore, many in the congregation are children and elderly using the parking lot. Our parking situation is less than desirable during the rainy weather. The parking area by our church hall is also in a severe state of disrepair and is in need of some fill and asphalting. This area is also the playground for our children and our youth for their various youth activities during the week. However, whenever rain falls, the entire area becomes saturated with water overflow for lengthy periods of time. As a church, we are mandated from God to work in the community. We have been doing so for some 38 years and look forward to this continuing for many years to come. Over the past decades, our church has hosted and allowed the usage for school graduations, weddings, funerals, baptisms, salvation of souls, scholarships, radio broadcasts, vacation Bible schools, seminars, prison and hospital fellowship, missionary activities, family fun days, not excluding large holiday events for Christmas, Easter, and Thanksgiving. It is estimated that the cost of the badly needed repairs, renovations are stated below and attached in the estimates. Roof repairs as attached, parking area for main churchyard as attached, parking lot for church hall attached. Thank you, Honorable Premier, and wasn't this Premier, for your kind consideration in the above matters, and we look forward to your favorable response at your earliest convenience. Yours respectfully, Pastor Anna Grassa Smith Joseph and Assistant Pastor Kim Evans Jr., for on behalf of our Board of Deacons and Trustees, Church of God Holiness, 38 Lords Way, Selkirk Avenue. Attached, they gave three estimates, one from Hill Construction Company for the roof repairs. The total for the standing seam roofing was $102,962.42. He gave an alternate estimate if shingles were put for $79,288.50. Another one was from Hides and Son for $100,047. There was one from Watler Metal Products for $113,900, and there was a MS Trucking, whoever they were, for $12,000 for crusher run, spread, and compacting. The letter was, according to the record, received by the Honorable former Premier. In fact, the handwriting on it so shows the endorsement on the letter that was from the Red Bay Church of God, and it reads as follows: to be discussed for the new budget, because it was received on the 14th of June 2012. And when the note goes on to say, when the budget is passed, I will know exactly how much, signed Premier, former Premier. And at that time, it was an indication that $150,000 would be given. There's a red ink through the $150,000 and $100,000 circle, which was what he approved to be done. There was a further request from the Red Bay Gospel Band for a lesser sum to the former Premier as well, for $8,105 to be paid by Briere, and I hope I pronounced that right, B-R-I-E-R-E Productions Group in Canada, an estimated shipping and handling from Miami to Cayman for the upgrade of their PA system, which was a vital part of the band equipment for doing outreach concerts, Christmas caroling, occasional to other local churches and groups. Also, they have assisted for 3 years the Westland Christian Academy in fundraising to send musical students to the U.S. for various competitions. And that is also signed, I agree, by the former Premier, and that was on 1st of June. They all came for expenditure for the 2012-13 budget. As you know, this budget was one of the few budgets that went through more scrutiny than anything else, not only Cabinet, but the Legislative Assembly, FCO. The country, which was no secret, we came here and reported to the country, was in a cash position up until the end of December. In fact, I said I went to the UK in January out of abundance of caution to make sure we got that buffer of an overdraft in case we needed it, and I reported quite happily that we did need it. You would also know that the majority of our funds come in from January to March. The first priority, and I should say out of abundance of cautions, that we as a whole in government took the position that these were commitments that were made, signed, and communicated to the various persons before the 18th, 19th of December when we took over. And we felt that as a whole in government, we were going to keep those commitments for the funds that were there. And in new commitments that came in, we would not be processing them. We would leave them for in the new government that came in place. It happens that one of the churches that I attend, of the many churches, was one of the recipients. And can you imagine what the headlines would be as the renowned Christian within the group who attends Red Bay Church refused to give the church after the former premier had approved it and communicated to them? That probably would have been hotter than what appeared in the past 3 or so days. I have never made it my modus operandi of being a vindictive politician, and neither have any of my colleagues here. It is most unfortunate the way that the story has turned out. I can tell you that there was a board meeting at our church. There was a members meeting at the church in Red Bay last night, and the church takes this very, very seriously and is dealing with it internally, because we have not been a church that have extended our hands to the government. When you look at the history of the church at Red Bay, the acre property was given by the late Mr. Selkirk, and it was given on a condition precedent that if we could build and develop a church, and which was one of the first subdivisions in that area, he would have given the property for free. We took that challenge on, and the rest is history. Not only have we built a church there based on our tithes and our offerings during the former times, and with a lot of transient persons given, because we are a church that believe and practice giving our 10%, because we are a Bible-believing church, and we still believe that the blessings will come. It's unfortunate that political spins have been put to it, because I was not even premier at the time that the approval was given. But I felt that just like we kept the obligations with this, and it was not a majority, it was a unanimous decision by our government. This, as in other things, we're holding government to keep the country together. We're not in a witch hunting exercise, and those persons who choose to make it that way will have their day. I've always been a very forgiving person. I don't mind being a sacrificial lamb if people want to say that I should not have kept the status quo, that I should have done otherwise. The jury is still out. I merely did what my conscience said to all 10 churches that the former premier had done. And I have the evidence here. It's free to make a FOI, and according to those rules, we'd be more than happy to release it. You can check every document here, and you won't find my handwriting in it. What I would say, though, having said that, I do support giving churches and other organizations within our community, because unless we're planning to change what our motto says, that he wasn't McKeever Bush, and it's not Ralston, it's not even one of you, he in our country is Almighty God. We firmly believe that he has and still is established and has kept our land. And I've said that publicly, and I'll say that here. I am not ashamed of my religious affiliation. It's not even politically correct in some forums. But when people elected me, they know they were electing a Christian woman, and the day that I have to compromise my morals or to attempt to be economical with the truth is the day that I pack up my bags and go home. I am not going to change programs or policies by other politicians, whether it's PPM, UDP, based on the sole fact that ideologically we're not on the same baseline. That is what has divided our country. That is what will continue to divide our country. We are too small of a country, and we have too much going for us. And if persons want to take political stabs at me for doing what we as a government thought it was right, then I apologize if they feel that that's what's going to make their heart tick. But I can tell you that as long as Miss Juliana is there, I will always do what is right. Do I get it right all of the time? Absolutely not. That's why I'm human. But you can rest assured that you will get the truth and nothing but the truth. And that's what I've done this morning. Now, people can obviously interpret it whichever way they want with it. The church, I can tell you the church is extremely hurt about the way the story was given, because we are not a church that wants to get into the public and have the name of the Lord or the edifice of the Lord destroyed. And there's very strong consideration. There's another meeting yet to go. Although we need it in that church, and I'm sure other churches need it, that if it means having to give back the check to the government, many of us in the congregation are prepared to do that and do what we've always done at that church, wait on the Lord to provide it. And that, I'm not saying that because it's political correct to say it. It was discussion throughout the church, and people are prepared to pledge. In fact, there's a meeting tonight where people feel so strong and hurt about the way the store has been spent, and know the life that I have lived and have contributed from a private capacity, even as a teenage girl, when I understood that we were expected as Christians to give 10%. And it's a joy for me personally to still do it. That someone somewhere would want to spend the store to let it appear that it was only one or two churches that's the brat because that's my constituent, or Red Bay because I occasionally return there. Nothing was mentioned about any other churches, and I'm kind of grateful because I wouldn't want those churches to be going through what our congregation is now going through, being thrown to the wolves, as it were, with a lot of untruths being put out there. And they are going to be making their final deliberation. They've been in fasting and praying, seeking the mind of God. What is the best thing to do? And I can tell you that very strong at the forefront with that was very passionate expressions last night. Sister Julie, we do not want to have you or your name in any way jeopardized, because we still believe that a good name is rather to be chosen than riches. We understand that it was not you, you're just basically the deliverer, but besides that, we have a higher calling, and if it means that the name of the Lord is to be exalted and we have to do without it and go another 20 years with a leak of roof and with parking lots is not fixed, whatever it is to let people know that we still serve a God who hears answer prayers is what our congregation is prepared to do. I hope that that has cleared it up, but should you still have questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Just one more. Thank you for that very comprehensive answer, Ms. Premier. And I'd also note that Commanding and Compass hasn't reported anything on this story yet, so just so everybody knows that. But we have had an open records request. One of our reporters filed it for the information on the nation building funds for 2012 and 13 year. Our reporter who made that informed me this morning that they are now at the last day of the deadline for an internal review of that request, i.e. they made the request, it was denied, and it had to go to an internal review process within the ministry.
Did he say who denied it?
I don't know. But I'm just questioning. I mean, if
Let me just say this. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. But let me just say this. What I read this morning, obviously was a statement that I asked my chief of staff to prepare with it. And I can tell you that FOIs don't come to me personally as a minister. And usually I read the information when you guys print it. But I can also tell you that I will make inquiries when I leave this press conference to find out exactly what transpired. But based on the statement that was here, and let me just read it again to make sure that this section where it says that FOI details of these expenses up to the end of the budget year 2011-12 have already been released in earlier statements and via responses to FOI inquiries. So if that is not the case, I will undertake, Brent, to find out what is happening specifically with your request, and I can assure you that Ms. Juliana has had no say whatsoever in denying it, but I'm quite curious to find out why it would be denied, because it is public funds and the public should know what is happening with these funds.
the request for up through 2011-12 was released. It was just the 2012-13, the current year, that was not released. And
Well, it's
I mean,
the
if
same
you're saying that
principle.
should have been released, or you think it should be released, then I guess
Absolutely.
why hasn't it? You know.
Well, that's just another example that we're the ministers, and even at the level of Premier, we still have internal processes that as Premier, I am going out on a limb to be accused of interfering with the civil service process. But when it comes to accountability and transparency, that's an interference I don't mind taking licks for.
Madam Premier, I mean, obviously CNS did run the story, as we all know, as a result of members of the congregation contacting us and telling us. My question would be, first of all, do you not have any concerns that that announcement was made during the election campaign? And that's the issue that has caused concern, is how it looks that when you chose to make the announcement in the church. Secondly, I contacted the ministry, and I also contacted your PR representative, and I was told that I could not get any information, because my first question would have been, when was this approved? However, I was told that they would not speak about it, they didn't want to speak about it, and that the only way I could get any information on that issue would be to put in an FOI request, which is something that is happening persistently when we as journalists now call up and ask ministerial staff for basic information, sometimes not even controversial. We are told that to ask for an FOI request for everything. At the very least, that's 40 days. We're news organisations. Our deadlines are then that day. So it's an additional... so I'd like you to sort of address that issue of why the announcement was made during the election campaign and why it is that I couldn't get the questions answered when I called up.
Well, the announcements, that's a spin with the greatest respect that it was made during the election campaign. Yes, the election is slated, and this is when it was done. But Ms. Wendy, with all honesty, when I took over the office of the Premier, obviously we know what happened. It was late December, it was in the holiday season, when we had to go to the UK. I wanted to make sure that whatever files were turned over to me were complete files, and I had an opportunity to go through them. The first, as you would know, the Nation Building Fund, a very huge part of the Nation Building Fund, as was set up from its founder, is to deal with scholarships. So the first priority was not churches when we started to deal with it. The first priority was scholarships, because we had numerous students having to go back to university. And universities don't operate days like when I was there, when the government was late in sending the funds, where they would send a letter saying, hello, we're going to send the money. If the monies aren't there now, our students get locked out of their classes, their options, and their dorm even. So we took all of the resources to make sure that the funds for the scholarships were properly processed and set off so the students could get. Once that was done, then basically the next stage was to look at, there was an element dealing with vocational training, which Mr. Moore and those operate with the technical training to try to get those students back online with their funds that was there. We spent an inordinate amount of time dealing with another institution that does computer teaching and lecturing, and even now that one has not been resolved, because I had specific questions on that, and I'm not prepared to dispense those funds until I'm satisfied that all is in order there. Whenever it's individuals who are doing this lecturings that the former Premier did it, I dig deeper, not because I distrust particular individuals, but I want to make sure that before the funds are given, that they're going to the purpose that they're supposed to be going to. The next round of consideration was the churches. That brought us all the way into March. And you have to understand, that's not the only thing I do in my ministry. Even before taking office of Premier and Minister of Finance, I had one of the biggest, if not the biggest ministry in the government. And if I had done churches first thing as I got in January, you would have heard a different story. The churches was the last amount to come out of the Nation Building Fund. And the reason we did that was because I wanted to make sure that the commitments that had been made for the scholarships, that it could be met. And as a matter of fact, when you look at the commitments that was made, the amounts requested, it was 1.208.03429, and the former Premier owner approved $586,405,000 of that. So even him himself had cut back in the request before he demitted office. We, as it was, and I had the documents here where it's signed, as they were approved, and you'll see from the spreadsheet that was given, I think it says total 2012-2013 commitments handed to me by my technical staff, and they're all listed what the commitments and stuff were. And as I said, when we took over, we were a holding government, and unless we could find that there was something illegal that had been done before, that would have been the novus intervenius that would have prevented us from dispersing the funds. We could not find it, and these disbursement communication had been made to the churches that they had been granted it. It was written down, and I can tell you there are some requests that are in that has nothing from the Premier. Those churches haven't received anything, not because they may not be worthy, but the position we took, let the new government that comes in deal with that there. We were not going to get ourselves into that, and that's what transpired. As to the extent, Ms. Wendy, about asking a question, I got one notification only, and that was from my chief of staff. I'm not sure whether the inquiry was from you or from the press generally, yesterday afternoon about if I had comments, and I said no, I had no comments at this time because I'm going to be dealing with it at the press conference this morning, and that was also because I was aware that the Red Bay Church, which was the church mostly under the microscope, was having a meeting last night. I wanted to have that knowledge from the meeting last night when I came to the meeting this morning, and that's the only reason why, because as I said, they are public funds, and I have no hesitation whatsoever in getting the information out as to why it was done, when it was done, and the reason for the nation building fund. And let me just say, for abundance of caution, before people think I'm throwing a former premier or a former minister underneath the bus, that's not the intent. The intent is just to state the facts, when the date was given, and as I've said, I, as I'm sure my colleagues are here, support the nation building fund. Obviously, it has to be prioritized and it has to be balanced with the other needs of the country, and I believe that what has been done. For me to say that the churches have not historically and currently made valuable contributions to society would be less than economical with the truth. They have, and they continue to do. Will you find one or two amongst it that we may feel their priorities aren't right? I'm sure that happened across the social stratification. But if we're going to continue to say that we're a Christian country, then I think it's not out of order for it to be done properly through the due processes, because it's no different from sponsoring the private schools. Government cannot build a school in every corner to be able to cater to every 400 or 500 students, but education is mandatory. So the minister, not just this one, but although he has continued it from Mr. Truman Bodden days, saw that it was more prudent to give the various private schools so that we could keep the standard of education up. And let me just conclude by saying this, and this is a personal persuasion, but when the fear of the Lord is removed from the community, there are no boundaries.
I believe that request came from me yesterday. I was looking for comment on this topic as well as another one, and I'll ask about that. But just one question on the topic at hand.
Sure.
It's the timing of the money received that's being questioned. And you mentioned that there were other churches who had put in a request. Did they also receive checks at the same time? If so, how many? How many churches received checks?
There's a total of 10 churches, and there were processed at the end of February, and they received it between the first and second week of March.
So 10 churches received it during that time.
And all 10 of those were previously approved, and the 5 of us ministers agreed with keeping the status quo that they were deserving. There was one church that was previously approved that ministers took the decision that they had already received a substantial amount, and because the commitments made was over almost $200,000 of the budget that was there, that church was not given to keep it within the budget that was there, because we were not prepared to go and ask for extra funds or to wear funds from another head to make that commitment.
My other question to you, there's a Facebook page that's circulating.
So I heard.
In short, it's saying, vote the Premier out. Do you have any comments about that Facebook page?
I haven't seen it, but you know where I stand with that, Tama. There's 2 things I'd like to say about that. Advertising is the best friend to politician. And in advertisement, for me, there's not such thing as negative advertisement. Has my name out there, and there's a thing called subliminal messaging. If somebody is willing to pay for Facebook to put my name out there, I believe that my Caymanian people have integrity and good sense not to be fooled by a questionable motive for putting that up. The second thing is I've always said this, when you get hit from behind so much, it means that you're up front.
And my question is to any one of you who can take this. Do we have any worried as to what's happening with the PricewaterhouseCoopers value for money on the West Bay Road situation.
Again, the independent review, as we discussed last week, we're obviously anticipating that that would be done, as I think we mentioned, in a couple of weeks, and that's still, as we understand it, on track. We are just about finalized. We've gotten our last set of comments back now from legal and some of the other government agencies on the final amendments that were made on the third amendment, I should say, to the agreement. And it's anticipated that we would have that done with cabinet possibly by a round robin in the next day or so. And then also, as I said, the independent review should be concluded very, very shortly, because all of the components that are in the Third Amendment are being considered in that review at this time.
While I have you on the floor, I have a question from my colleague on a sports situation. He's asking if you can confirm if the Bordentown Football Club is the only football club that gets funding directly from the budget. From what he can tell, it's the only one with a purchase agreement, and it's worth over $13,000. Can you say why that club gets direct government funding but none of the others? Is that the case?
No, that's not the case. I tend to find that some of this information that CITN obtains, I don't know where they obtain it from, Tammy. I'll really be honest with you. But the Bordentown Football Club is not the only club. You've been traditional. There's several clubs that have received funding directly from the government on a one-off basis, and some that have received funding from the government on a continual basis for many, many years. When we took office, I found that there's some clubs, again, in the same way as the Premier, I don't think it's necessary to name them here, but there's several clubs who've received funding for many years from the government in excess of some of the funding that you just mentioned for that specific club. My philosophy has been that there are several football clubs, for instance, football being the national sport, so to speak, and that assistance helps those clubs because those clubs tend to cater to many of the grassroots children within the districts, and those clubs are some of the larger sporting organizations within the various districts. And as I said, that is not the only club. There have been clubs within other districts, East End, West Bay, Georgetown, Northside, for that matter, have all received funding at some point from government during my tenure, and certainly, as I said, prior to our tenure in government as well.
Morning.
Morning.
The Radio Cayman aired an interview with the Commissioner for the Standards in a Public Life, and she had said that the past cabinet and this current cabinet have deferred the law that would give her commission teeth with regards to the register of interest. Can you explain, since there are some cabinet members from the previous cabinet on this cabinet, why has this been deferred, and why hasn't the law been passed since the Constitution of 2009 gave the commission power in the beginning?
Jay, I think the best person to address that to is probably the president of the cabinet, because we all swear confidentially there, and we, not knowing that this question was coming up, we haven't got released to discuss the matters that appear in the cabinet.
Okay. Also, with the register of interest, it states specifically that if you are taking an overseas visit or an overseas tour, and relating to any way arising out of your membership of the Legislative Assembly, where the cost of the visit was not wholly borne by yourself or by the Cayman Islands government public funds, you're supposed to declare that. I know a couple of you have gone on a trip where it's not been wholly borne by the government or yourselves, and I'm just curious to why not one member of candidate has listed trips on the register of interest.
Well, I can answer for mine. If you read further down the register of interest, it says CPA trips not included. And those
No, I understand. I wasn't.
No, but I just want to clarify, because you said several others. I'll speak for myself because I have personal knowledge of that. CPA have paid for all of my CPA trips, but because CPA is Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, that is an exemption in there, so I would not have entered. And those are the other only other trips I've gone on. Obviously, if I go on personal vacation, which I get very few, not when I go to the bar, I would not be included there.
And I'm not trying to call anybody out, but obviously
no, but
there
I
are
just
some
wanted
very,
to clarify that, because I think it needs to be cleared.
It seems like not many people are adhering to the standards of the law with the register of interest. Some people have declared that they have a job, but they didn't declare what the job was. or they get money from a job, but they didn't clear what that was either. Some
That's
said
not
they own
me
a
either,
business.
'cause I left
I'm
my
not
job.
I'm not saying it's you, but I'm just referring to the Register of Interest law in
Yeah.
itself. It seems like nobody pays attention to it, and it seems it's an extremely important law that needs to be looked at. And there are two members of your panel up here that did go on a trip in the last 2 years that didn't report it, and it was paid partially by the people that sent them on the trip, or why they were gone.
Well, my only response to that is that in interest of transparency, and since we pledge to be a sunshine government, then you direct those to the two that you know that went.
Minister
You have my
Scotland
permission.
and Minister Glidden, you both went to India with Dr. Shetty, and your hotel and your food were paid for by Dr. Shetty.
The trip that I went on to India, if I recall, was paid for. The airline, at least
The airline was paid by you, but
Correct.
the
Not by
Shetty
me,
people
not
told me
by
they
me,
paid
by
for your
the-
hotel and your food.
by the government. I don't recall that right now, Jay. But if you want to, I can certainly look back at that.
I can't remember that, Jay, but I would have thought. I mean,
It's, again, I'm not trying to
Sure.
call you guys out, I'm not trying
No.
to do that. I mean, the idea is, nobody's paying attention to the law, and it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be taken care of, in my personal opinion.
Well, I'm going to just come back at that with the greatest respect. Perhaps I'll let you get away with saying some people are perceived not to be paying attention, but I don't think it's an accurate statement to say nobody is, because I can certainly speak for myself, and I'm not just trying to isolate myself. Other members are here, but I can tell you when whatever you see on mine is what it is. I was a practicing attorney with Truman Body and Companies, and I opted to divest myself of all interest and not get engaged in any business. Was it because I wasn't capable or I couldn't have? That was a personal decision that I took, and I'll continue should I be returned to the polls. I'm not saying that should be the lip test for anybody else, but that's why mine seems so non-interesting when you read mine.
I'm just not trying to throw anybody under the bus, that's all.
Okay, appreciate it.
Like that.
Speaking of being thrown under the bus,
You're
Minister
a big
Seymour.
bus.
Minister Seymour, did you say at the beginning of this that the National Housing Program was going to be now a rent-to-own program for all of the houses, or just to Boddentown, or could you clarify that?
Well, the leasing program has always been active in the National Housing Trust, so it's nothing new.
Okay, but correct me if I'm wrong. Initially, with the NHDT program that was started by Janet James and all those guys over at NHDT, it was going to be an ownership program. That was changed when Mr. Bodden took over the board to only a rental program for the homes that were available. And now you're saying it's going to be a lease to own program?
As I just said, the leasing program, it's up to the board to use whatever strategy that they want at the time for whatever is going on, to get these houses out there. If they don't have anyone that want to purchase homes, then they got to lease them. So it's all about demand. The people in Boddentown wants to own homes. People in West Bay wants to own homes. So I can only say to you that option has always been there for the board, to take that opportunity. The board now is under new leadership. Thankfully so, and that's the direction that we're moving in as minister. That's the we have to listen to the people that we're trying to cater to. A lot of times we try to cater for people, and it's not what they want. What the people want is to own homes, and all of the cabinet and the ministers are in full support of Caymanians owning a piece of this rock.
Are there certain time frames for the lease to own? Or do they have to lease for a certain number of years, or can you say
Well,
that works?
based on past experiences with some of the programs that they had in West Bay and Georgetown, the board saw it necessary for a timeline, or a couple of years, for leasing, which would always be that within that time will be a time for you to get a intimate relationship with the prospective owner of that home, and tracking habits and everything else. There's been some problems in the past, so if a person passes the test of 2 years or 5 years or whatever it is, in terms of leasing, then you'd be approved to own. It's not just a situation where people just come in and I want to own a home because it's a government program, and then you stop paying the loan or stop servicing the loan. We need to have a full appreciation, and each individual case will be different. That these persons are serious about wanting to own a home and are committed to servicing the loan and the agreement that they sign.
Okay, and then just one more quick question for Minister Glidden, and then I'll end. The issue you spoke about last week on the tour buses with the Cayman-only jobs and some of the issues going on there. Some of the representatives from the industry are sort of up in arms over this, and they've talked to the employment agencies, the government employment agency. They can't get people to come work for them. And can you give us an update on that? And I mean, are there people who want to be tour bus drivers and so forth, and can they find these jobs?
Brett, I'm not sure exactly why they're up in arms. Hopefully we're able to improve the situation. The situation, as I've been told, is that there was a determination in the law that the requirement to be Caymanian also required to be or applied to the bus drivers themselves, not only the owners or what was defined as operators. That definition has now been given an opinion by legal, and that's the legal opinion that should have been applied. The bus drivers rightly have expressed a concern to me, and the discussion or the request by them was specifically to change that requirement to be Caymanian and allow it to be non-Caymanian. Myself and my colleagues felt that at this particular time, at a time when there was a significant number of unemployed, unskilled Caymanians, that this was one of those areas that should not be changed. And if, while we've had talk about legislation to provide certain jobs for Caymanians only, surprise, surprise, this one was actually in the law for quite a long time and had not been identified. And so we made a decision that because of the huge number of Caymanians unemployed, that there was no need for us to expand this capacity to actually allow foreign nationals to be drivers. Now, in speaking to the bus drivers, while they understood the decision for that, they said that the barrier for entry that the Cayman Islands government placed on Caymanians was unreasonable, and some of those were fees that were charged, some of those were the tests that were required, and some of those were the time that it took. The government has taken a policy position, which is a decision that I announced last week, that we would remove the fee requirement for Caymanians. We would adjust or ask the board to reassess the test to make sure that it was a fair test, and that we would also give an interim period that they would be allowed to use Caymanians pretty much immediately, as long as they felt comfortable with using them, to give an interim period to allow Caymanians to qualify and to be able to get employed. And why that upset, or has upset any of the tour operators, I'm not sure. I thought it was a fair request when they said that the barrier was too high, and that made it extremely difficult for Caymanians. While they had an interest in hiring Caymanians, it was difficult. We still feel that in this particular area of tour operators or tour drivers for the buses, where there can't be a suggestion that there is a high level of training, expertise, or experience that is necessary, that this is one of those areas that we should be encouraging and supporting, and we've decided to go further than that and actually incentivize Caymanians to be employed in that industry. That's as brief as I can make it. We can go into a lot more details as to some of the challenges, but if that's necessary.
Just a quick follow, because if I remember, can you give us an undertaking? Can we get a copy of the test that supposedly the tour drivers are failing so miserably? I believe you said last week it was 95% failure rate.
That was the information that was provided to me by the bus operators.
Can you give us? Can you send us a copy?
I can. I'll get my chief
I don't know
officer.
if we can pass it.
Well, that's it. That's why I want to take it out.
I was just actually going to throw the challenge out, and
Exactly.
CG, you could find out whether the test is an appropriate one or not, and give it maybe to the media, see if they would pass it. Because some of the questions that I heard in it, I can tell you one thing, they would be challenging.
And
Sense of being comical.
And we also want to say that not only were there challenges in terms of the test, but there were challenges in the way the test was actually administered, right? So if people had significant special needs, writing challenges, and we've taken a cabinet decision to give instructions, drafting instructions that would address those concerns. For those people, apparently this has been an ongoing problem. I can say as the new minister, it has just been brought to my attention. We've worked as diligent as possible to try to address it as quickly as possible. We apologize for the fact that this has been ongoing for a long time. Not sure why it hasn't been addressed, but that's the intention. We understand it's different. We understand that even from the bus drivers, we want to say that this is a good example. We have a situation where the bus operators found that it was easier to pay a $2,500 work permit to bring someone here to drive a tour bus than to hire a Caymanian because of the difficulties that they were having. And not that they didn't have Caymanians that could do it, but they said the challenges that were there. Like I said, the barrier was just too high, and we've taken steps to address that. We've notified the bus operators, and while it is some difference, some challenge, because obviously you would have made an investment and brought operators, and they were here as drivers before. I've even I've even given instructions to my chief officer to look, because we may have had a situation where minimal numbers, but someone who knew the precedent that was set before, they get a work permit, bring the person here. While this determination or definition has been changed, the person is now on island, a work permit fee has been paid. But the board now says, oh yeah, last week we allowed that to happen, but this week we're not allowing that to happen. And we have said, if someone comes and identifies that happened during that transition period, that they should be refunded the money for their work permits, because it was unfair for them having brought the person in good faith on a continuing situation. Like I said, we don't expect, but we've had, I think, 3 representations that people actually fall in that. I can say the board specifically asked for legal advice in the determination of the definition, and after getting the determination that their definition was the legal determination, they've asked whether we would be willing to give instructions to basically instruct the board to break the law, and we basically made a decision not to do that, right, but to fulfill the law.
My question is for the representatives of Bordentown. And Mr. Scotland, I should say that it is unfortunate that you find some of the questions ridiculous, but it's suffice to say that a lot of them come from the questions come from the people of this country. Having said that, next week there will be public meetings in your district regarding the environmental impact assessment of a waste management facility. And Mr. Seymour, you in particular enlightened us last week as to how you felt about the facility going in your district. Just wondering how you feel about these public meetings that we're going to be hearing about now that there's an a draft environmental statement that has been made available by those who conducted the EIA. And your thoughts on it? Has your opinion changed? What are you thinking at this point?
My opinion is the same, and I.
Have you had a chance to look at the statement?
I haven't had a chance to look at, you mean the EIA statement?
Yeah.
No, I haven't had a chance. I'm just hearing that it's come out now. No direct communication was made to us about whether it was out or not. I haven't seen it or read it. And definitely it's encouraging to hear that at least that they've done that. It'll be interesting to hear what they have to say.
And Minister Scotland? Have you had a chance to look at it? You're the Environment Minister.
Tammy, first of all, about the questions, I understand where the questions come from, but I want to say that sometimes, you don't have to ask the same silly question that someone asks you just because they say that to you. Sometimes persons can substantiate information. You said that that was the only payment to any football club, and
I was asking a question on behalf of my colleague
that was the
who's
only
in
purchase
sports.
agreement to any football club in the country, and that's the furthest from the truth. As far as the environmental impact assessment statement, the EIA statement, what has happened is exactly what we said from when we had the public meeting in Bordentown in August over a year ago. We said that there was a proposal for this project, and we were going to be doing an environmental impact assessment, and the result of that environmental impact assessment would inform the decision to do it, and that's exactly what's happened. So now there's a statement out, there's a public consultation process, which we also said was going to happen, the second part of the public consultation process, and there's also another document which I think will come out fairly soon as well, which is the technical review of the design, which was also carried out by the Environmental Advisor Board, Department of Environmental Health, and so on. And that document should soon be ready as well. And those documents, we said, would inform the decision. And as I said several weeks ago, there will be no decision now based on the timing left before the election. But I do encourage the public to familiarize themselves with the document, take part in the public consultation process, because I hope that information will inform the decision on how to deal with waste management as soon as the new government is formed. Because I keep encouraging the new government to make a decision on how waste management will be dealt with, because it is the most pressing priority facing our country at this time.
Sticking on the topic of the environment, just this week we had a report come out that Cayman didn't do so well out of all of the overseas territories in terms of its stance on the environment, largely because we do not have a conservation law in place. Do you have a response to that? This is a ministry you've been holding down for the last 4 years.
Tammy, I've just had a chance this morning to search up that report. I haven't seen a copy of the report myself officially, so I've had the chance just this morning to Google and find the report myself. And the report is based on or is an assessment of the 14 overseas territories. That's the first thing. And some of the territories that get good points or get graded high are places like British Antarctica and other territories that obviously focus very heavily on the environment. The low marks we've gotten, and there are some good points in the report about the Cayman Islands in my very, very brief read of it, that talks about some frameworks that we have for protection of some of our species and so on, and we do have some, and then some of the other treaties and so on that we also take part in. And so the place where we gain low marks is because we don't have environmental legislation. As we all know, it talks about as well. It does talk about our marine conservation and the protection of our species and so on. So of course it's easy to say that we fall lowest in it because of not having that piece of legislation. But there are other territories that fall in that same category as well. And we do know that we've had a draft bill for a very long time, a draft bill which I keep saying over and over again, that was there when we took office, a bill which has been very controversial, to say the least, when I keep repeating that when you had two sitting cabinet members who publicly were at odds over it, that says a lot to me in terms of the piece of legislation. And so I've been doing as much as I could do in the past 4 years to try to get that piece of legislation to where it is something that the country on the whole, because there is a lobby to pass the legislation, but I think it quite interesting as well. Even in the political hustings now, as the term might be, when you hear candidates, the question is asked: would you pass the National Conservation Law in its current form? And everyone says, "Oh, I would pass the law, but it would need a few changes." And the next candidate says, "Oh, I would pass the law, but it needs a few changes." So if every candidate has to make a few changes to the law, is the law ready to be passed at present, Tammy? I don't think the law is ready to be passed at present. There's been a lot of review. We had a public consultation process that was a very extensive public consultation process which produced a lot of feedback. I had a review carried out by the legal department which produced a lot of changes. Those changes were drafted, and I only recently got them about 2 or 3 weeks before the House was dissolved, so we have not, as a caucus in the cabinet, got to go through those changes either. So we have an amended bill, which I hope again will go back out. We can have some public consultation discussion on when the new government gets in again, because, like I said, it's a very complex piece of legislation. Environmental protection is about a couple of things. It's about species and habitat protection. This bill goes a lot further than that. An environmental protection bill that's in the format of the Marine Conservation Law would have been passed by now. This bill goes a lot further than that.
Sticking with what you've just been saying about the bill, I guess one could ask the same about the waste management facility. You've had 4 years. Why haven't we been able to get any movement on that? I mean, this is a question that you'll be getting, no doubt, if it's not going to go in Bordentown or if there are issues with it. Why haven't we seen any firm shovel in the ground, so to speak?
Tammy.
you're going to get that the last 4 years.
But Tammy, we started a process, as I said, over a year ago, which was based on a proposal that was received. I've said this many, many times. A proposal, the government did an RFP process first of all. That process produced a preferred provider at that time. I've always said that I believe that the costs, based on the what was presented there was going to be somewhere along the lines of what the GBB report had said, which was $100 million in capital expense, $25 million a year in recurrent expense to run that facility. An alternate proposal was presented to the government, and since that was presented in, I think, August 2011 or whenever that was, maybe prior to that, we have been going through a process to evaluate that proposal. That's where we are today. An environmental impact assessment, a technical review, and the results of those would inform a decision. No decision has been made to date. As I said, I hope it's on the top priority of the next government to make a decision about waste management for the future of the country. That's what the decision needs to be.
Madam Premier, anything further?
I just, out of abundance of caution, should just clarify. I think there was a question early on about a black church getting, for whatever it's worth. It's not the church that I attend, it was the Baptist church. Sorry, Wendy, you had
I
something
did
untoward?
actually have, sorry, I only asked just the one question, obviously, which was, I had two completely separate questions.
Sure, go ahead.
Can I just ask, the first one is election observers. Have you formally invited them yet? Because we still understand that it has to be the government. So if you could let us know what's happening about that. And also, referring to all the issues about the National Conservation Law and the waste management and other issues such as that, which are still very much unresolved. You campaigned as part of the UDP last time that you would pass an environmental law and you would address the waste management. Those were fairly strong commitments made on the UDP platform, neither of which have been fulfilled. How is it that the electorate can believe anything that you're about to say when you get on the hustings this time?
Because Wendy, what I can say is that that if that was the only thing that we had, if we had not done anything else that we campaigned about, then I could say the electorate could believe that. But if you look at other things that we campaigned on, that we've delivered on many of those, most of the things that were campaigned on, and in fact, in addition to what we campaigned on, other things have been delivered on. I can say if the electorate is minded to not support and re-elect me personally, I can say this to, not on behalf of my other colleagues, me personally, because we've not passed environmental legislation, then that will be my fate, and they'll make that decision come May 22nd. But I can say that I have worked, and we have worked diligently to try to come to a point where we can get a piece of legislation that can be approved, that can take the country forward in terms of our national conservation and our environmental conservation. I believe that, sometimes I think that it's probably better to start from scratch and draft a piece of legislation that we would be much more comfortable with, that the rest of the country would be much more comfortable with, that I said would carry out what is needed, which is species protection and habitat protection and preservation.
And if I may respond to your inquiry about the election observers, obviously members of the press and media would remember that a motion was passed in the House that we didn't object to them coming here. It's into the now sole discretion of His Excellency the Governor. Has he invited them to it? I have no formal intimation that he has, but I would expect that as we're near an election, if he has not already done it, it should be imminent in coming.
Just a quick follow to that. Questions arisen during the elections forums about who's paying for it. And I believe the governor said they were working on that as well. Do you have any information about that?
Well, as to date, as Minister of Finance, I have not been approached to make an allocation or variation for it. So I am being cautiously optimistic that FC or the Governor's office, certainly in this instance, would pay for it because it was not a forecasted line item in my budget.
Actually, and I don't know if something's changed, but in my correspondence with the Governor's office, I was told explicitly that this is not under the realm of the Governor's office, that they are not the ones who invite the observers, nor would the office be, in a sense, paying for the trip, that it comes under government. I was told that. I have the email.
Well, if you would be so kind as to forward that email to the 5 ministers here, I'll give you the undertaking that under any other business, I shall be the first to raise it in the next cabinet meeting. That was not our cognizance of the matter.